You know, when you look at the history of the Middle East, it can seem, well, just chaotic, right? A complete jumble of events. But what if I told you there's a pattern, a rhythm to it all? Today, we're going to look at that entire history as one big, repeating cycle. Powerful empires rise, they unite the region, and then they crumble, only for the cycle to start all over again. Let's see how this one idea can unlock the whole story.
And that brings us to the big question, the one that frames everything we're about to discuss. Think about it. This is the place that gave us our first cities, writing, even the rule of law. So why? Why has it also been the stage for so many of history's most lasting and bitter conflicts? To even begin to answer that, we've got to go way back, all the way to the start.
All right, so where do we begin? Well, it only makes sense to start right at the dawn of civilization itself. This is where the whole idea of an empire was literally invented. It's where humanity first figured out how to organize itself on a massive scale, and in doing so, laid the groundwork for, well, everything that came after. Okay, just look at this timeline. The pace of innovation here is absolutely incredible. Over in Mesopotamia, you've got the Sumerians basically inventing cities and writing from scratch. And at the same time, along the Nile, ancient Egypt is coming together as one civilization. For a long time, you had local empires, like the Akkadians, who would rise up and have their moment in the sun. But then in the 6th century BC, the Persian Empire comes along and does something nobody had ever seen before. And this was a huge deal. The Persians built the world's first true superstate. They connected all these ancient separate civilizations under one single government. This was the first great era of unity in our cycle. Then a new player storms in from the west, Alexander the Great. And his conquests didn't just smash an empire, they brought Greek culture, what we call Hellenistic culture, and created this incredible, vibrant mashup of East and West. So, true to our cycle, after Alexander dies, his massive empire shatters into pieces. But just as those Hellenistic kingdoms start to fade, another power from the West enters the picture, Rome. And its arrival, along with a profound religious revolution brewing within its borders, was about to change the world forever. You see, under the long period of relative peace that Rome brought, the famous Pax Romana, a new faith, born right there in Judea, starts to catch on. We're talking, of course, about Christianity. It went from this small, often persecuted group to becoming the official religion of the entire Roman Empire. This completely changed the region's identity and set the stage for the next massive chapter in its story.
Okay, this slide right here shows an absolutely critical turning point. For centuries, the two reigning superpowers, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire and the Persian Sasanian Empire, had been at war. They had basically fought each other to a standstill. Both were totally exhausted, broke, and politically unstable. And this created the perfect power vacuum. Right at the exact moment, a powerful new force was rising out of the Arabian Peninsula.
And what was this new force? It was Islam. After the Prophet Muhammad's death, his successors, known as the Caliphs, led the newly unified Arab tribes on a series of conquests so rapid they were honestly mind-boggling. The Caliphate they built wasn't just another empire, no. This was a brand new political and religious order that would kick off the next great cycle of unity for the entire Middle East.
So, this new Islamic empire kicks off a period of incredible cultural and scientific achievement, a true golden age. But as we've seen this cycle go, unity doesn't last forever, and this era was no different. It was destined to fragment and ultimately be shattered by a terrifying storm coming out of the east.
We're talking about the Abbasid dynasty, and their capital, Baghdad, was, well, for a time, it was the intellectual and cultural center of the entire planet. At places like the House of Wisdom, scholars gathered and translated all the knowledge of the ancient Greeks. They made huge leaps forward in math, inventing algebra, as well as medicine and astronomy. And this wasn't just one culture's achievement. It was this brilliant fusion of Arab, Persian, Greek, and Indian ideas all working together. But here's the thing about massive empires. They're really, really hard to run. The Abbasid Caliphate was just too big. Slowly but surely, power started to slip from the center. Regional governors and warlords began carving out their own little kingdoms, their own dynasties. You even had rival caliphates pop up, like the Fatimids in Egypt. The political unity of the Islamic world was cracking from the inside.
And then, 1258, that's the year the final blow landed. Mongol armies come storming in from the east. They sacked Baghdad, burning the House of Wisdom to the ground, and killing the last Abbasid caliph. This was an absolute catastrophe, a psychological and cultural shockwave that the region would take centuries to recover from. But, like a phoenix from the ashes of that Mongol destruction, a new power begins to rise. Starting out as just a small state in what is now Turkey, this group would go on to build the last great unifying empire for the region, and its final caliphate, the Ottoman Empire.
And if there's one date you need to remember from this era, it's this one, 1453. This is when the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror captured Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, for over 1,000 years. This was way more than just a military victory. It was a world-changing moment. It symbolically slammed the door on the Roman era and cemented the Ottomans as the new dominant power in the Islamic world. Now, as the Ottomans were building their empire, a rival power starts to rise next door in Persia, the Safavids. And this wasn't just a squabble over land. This was personal. Their rivalry was rooted in that deep sectarian split in Islam. The Ottomans positioned themselves as the leaders of the majority Sunni world. The Safavids, on the other hand, made Shia Islam the state religion of Persia. This created a huge political and religious dividing line, and you can still feel the echoes of that rivalry today. For hundreds of years, the Ottomans were a global superpower, no question. But time catches up with everyone. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the empire was in trouble. You had internal corruption, a stagnant economy, and a string of military defeats by modern European armies. It got to the point where other powers started calling it the sick man of Europe, and that sickness made it vulnerable. And that long decline all came to a head in World War I. This is the moment the old imperial order was completely and totally shattered. And what replaced it? A new Middle East, designed not by the people who lived there, but by European diplomats with maps and rulers literally drawing lines in the sand. Look, to understand why the next 100 years were so messy, you have to see this absolute tangle of promises the British were making during the war. They told Arab leaders, hey, rebel against the Ottomans and we'll help you create a big independent Arab kingdom. At the exact same time, they were making a secret deal with France to chop up that same land for themselves. And then, on top of all that, they promised Zionist leaders they'd support a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It was a recipe for disaster. And this right here is the smoking gun, the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement. It was basically a secret backroom deal between Britain and France to carve up the Ottoman Empire like a cake once the war was over. This secret map became the blueprint for the borders of the modern Middle East. And here's the heart of the problem, the reason this caused so much trouble. The new borders for countries like Iraq and Syria were completely artificial. They ignored centuries of ethnic, religious, and tribal realities on the ground. They crammed rival groups into one country and split other groups between 2 or 3. By doing this, they planted the seeds for decades of conflict and instability. So that colonial map-making brings us into the modern era. And the story of the last century has really been about all the people in the region trying to deal with this messy legacy. It's been a period defined by wars, revolutions, and a constant, difficult search for a stable order. The decades after World War II were just one major event after another. In 1948, the creation of the State of Israel immediately triggers the First Arab-Israeli War. Then you've got the Six-Day War in '67, which totally redrew the map. The Iranian Revolution in '79 unleashes a new brand of political Islam. And more recently, the First Gulf War and the Arab Spring uprisings in 2011 have just kept shaking things up. So where does that leave us today? Well, the region isn't a simple tug-of-war between two big powers anymore. It's way more complicated. You have Iran trying to expand its influence through a network of allies, often called the Shia Crescent. Challenging that is a bloc of Sunni powers, led by Saudi Arabia. At the same time, Turkey is flexing its muscles again as a major independent player. And while you see some surprising new alliances forming, that core Israeli-Palestinian conflict is still a major unresolved source of tension for everyone. And all of this leaves us with one last big question. We've seen this cycle, this rhythm of unity and division, play out over and over again for literally thousands of years. So as we look at the complex rivalries and shifting alliances of today, are we just watching the latest chapter of that same old fragmentation, or could we, just maybe, be be witnessing the painful birth of an entirely new kind of regional order? The answer, for now, remains unwritten.